Yo, y'all ready for this? Yeah.
What's up, Bodybuilding.com listeners? My name is Danielle Bitts, and welcome back to the BBCom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Craig Bongelli. No stranger to BBCom, we recently welcomed Craig into the roster of our master coaches who will be guiding you through workouts on our newest fitness app. Craig also starred in our original docuseries, The Westside Method, where he travels back to Westside Barbell to put their training methods to the test. You can watch all the episodes on Bodybuilding.com's YouTube. Craig is a former professional strongman and prides himself on being a master of strength. Today we're going to talk through finding your 1-rep max, how to train for mass versus how to train for power, and why strength, above all, is the key you need to unlock the life you're looking for. Craig, welcome back to the pod.
It is a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
Excited to jump in with you today, starting with topic 1, building foundational strength. You and I talk about this a lot off camera. You know, when people start their journey, they struggle to understand the ratio split between strength and cardio. Now, we know the muscle is a heart and it needs to be worked appropriately, but I'm more so talking about the person who tries to go from sitting on the couch to signing up for their first competition or race as a means to get started. So first, Craig, tell us why a slow build of foundational strength work is a great place for most people to start when they're looking to begin their journey.
So that is a great question, and I admire all of the excitement people have when they have this new goal, they have the moment of inspiration. They're like, okay, here I go. I would say, though, that the best way to understand that is if I decided, I wake up today, I'm like, I'm going to bake a cake. I'm so excited, I'm baking a cake. And I do everything, I make the cake, I go to put it in the oven, I'm like, pardon me, an hour? It's going to take an hour to get this cake? I'm doing this in 20 minutes. I'm just going to 5X or I'm going to 3X the temperature, and I'm going to cook it for 20 minutes. I'm going to go really hard on that because I'm really excited about getting this cake that I want, and I'm going to end up having to do it again because my cake is going to be burnt or terrible or whatever happens to a cake if you cook it at 3X the temperature. Your physical results are very, very similar. If somebody wants a good place to put the excitement and the energy they have about their goals into achieving them, then they should put it into being consistent. They should put it into checking every box and checking every box with full intent with whatever those pieces are towards their goals. But if you just try to do it faster, you're going to end up having to remake your cake. Your cake being when you blow your hamstring off or hurt your back or blow your knees out or whatever.
By cake, we are not, in fact, referencing glutes in this instance.
No, that's perfect. I should have got a glute injury. I forgot people use glutes and cake interchangeably. So
Come on, Craig, keep up with the times.
Yeah, you're gonna bust your cake. Like one of your cakes is gonna get messed up, and you're gonna be back on the couch waiting to heal. So the excitement is great, and people should use that to inspire them to check all of the daily boxes to achieve their goals, not to try to get there faster. I remember when I was fighting, I'd have coaches all the time who were like, listen, smooth is fast, or slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. If you go out there and try to be really fast, it's not going to go well. And that works in almost any realm of achievement.
You know, slow and steady really does win the race when it comes to building strength. I think a lot of people don't even know where to start, right? I mean, your first timers going to the gym, they're picking up the dumbbells, they're doing a couple bicep curls, they're doing the elliptical, they're kind of just all over the place. So when it comes to, Craig, just like the most beginner strength split or the beginner program, what would you tell someone? Now, listen, this comes with a lot of disclaimers because our answer here is always, it depends, right? But, you know, in speaking in general terms, you know, what's a good place to start? How do we want to think about it?
So depending on, the first thing people should start with is a routine they can do. If I'm going to, and I likely will say that 4 days a week in the gym is a really great starting point for most goals, strength being one of them. But if you can only do 2, don't pick a 4-day program and get 2 or 3 days the first week, 2 or 3 days the second, and feel like a failure. So figure out what you can actually do. But I would say the options for strength, if I had to give 2, one would be a full body workout 3 days a week. And the second would be an upper, lower split. So you work your upper body twice a week and your lower body twice a week. If I were to take any contingencies off this, people can do whatever I say. It'd be upper, lower every week, 4 days a week. Simple movements with the idea in the beginning, not even being that you want to improve your results at each workout as much as you want to practice what you're doing. Like before you worry too much about, am I stronger? Is my performance better? Am I moving towards this number? Get good at what you're actually doing. Like before I worry about how many words per minute I can type, I'm going to figure out what finger is supposed to touch which keys instead of just trying to chicken peck faster. If that makes sense.
It does. And, it goes back to the fundamental movement patterns, right? And just really understanding, okay, what is the hinge that I'm going to really focus on right now? What is the knee dominant movement, the push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull, and then what am I doing to strengthen my core as well? Now we can argue all of those in a way, do work your core if you're lifting heavy enough to stabilize, right? But finding the consistent program. I think a lot of newbies and a lot of beginners in the gym, they think every workout has to be different every week. What you'll often find if you work with a really great trainer and you work with them every Monday and Wednesday, the Monday workouts are going to be the same over the 4 to 6 period, and the Wednesday workouts are going to be the same, and we're following progressive overload, and we're getting stronger in each of those moves.
Completely, and credit to the late night infomercials that popularized confusing your muscles, not to infringe on their trademarks if they still have them with that term. Like, good for them in terms of marketing, but bad for people in the sense that we think that's how weightlifting needs to work, especially for beginners. If somebody, going back to the idea of somebody being a fighter, if you decided, I think I'm going to be a competitive fighter, and you went to a boxing coach, and he taught you how to throw a jab day number 1, it was like, okay, jab's done, let's go do something else. I assume people would recognize pretty quickly, like, oh, if I stay with this coach, I'm going to get beat up. Like, I'm not good at this yet. Like, I can't go pressure test my jab. I've thrown it for half an hour one time. Like, you're going to do it a lot, like a lot, until you're good at it. And then some variation starts to make sense. Weightlifting is exactly the same. For somebody just starting out, you need to practice the movements. And ideally, especially when you're in a place where you're neurologically fresh, if you can program them internally correctly the first time, it'll save you years of heartache if you get to intermediate and realize, oh, I'm actually not squatting very well at all. So if I want to move to advanced, I have to go back to the beginning and internally rewire how I do this movement. That's a bad deal. So trying to start really hard and really fast can handicap your ultimate potential, which nobody wants.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You're essentially setting yourself up for, like you said, a lot of disappointment and then potentially injury, right? How many squats do you have to do in order to start, making your hips not feel that great? If you're not leveraging your glutes in the right way, or if you don't understand the basic fundamental of how to activate your glutes, you're going to have some serious problems here in a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, but doing that every single week and continuously increasing the weight on that movement.
Completely. And I get that that's often driven by excitement, but it's foolish. I get, and all of us have been there, but getting started on the right foot and programming things right the first time is invaluable.
I think it's inherently more important as a beginner. Find a coach. Invest in a coach, invest in the tools to guide you. Craig's going to have a really fantastic foundation and fundamental series on the app. He's going to teach you proper form for the big 3 lifts, the deadlift, the squat, the bench. So, take a look at those videos, study it, be a student of the game before you jump into these things. It's going to pay off in the long run.
Massively. You'll handicap yourself otherwise.
Agree. So, Let's move away from the beginner's mindset for a second. Now we're going to go into talking about finding your 1 rep max. But the disclaimer before we dive into this conversation, to your point, Craig, maybe when we get started, it's nice to know kind of what your baseline testing is, right? First of all, step 1 is my form solid. Great. Form checks out, done. Now, let's understand what your deadlift is, what your squat is, what your bench is, and let's just kind of gauge where you are. So, gym rats, of course, our precious gym rats, they love to go for a 1 rep max. You and I are probably both guilty of this. When we're feeling good, sometimes we just want to send it for that PR,
Hail Mary,
right?
here we go.
Especially we're coming off of Thanksgiving, right? That's always the best time to do it. You've eaten potatoes and cornbread for a couple of days. You're ready to get after it.
Yeah.
But Craig, talk to us about how often we should really be analyzing our PRs and why sticking to your program will garner to the stronger results. I want to kick this conversation off by defining what is a 1 rep max and what's the benefit of testing it.
Great question. So a 1 rep max is exactly what it sounds like. It is the most amount of weight or the maximum weight you can perform for a single repetition in a movement. So if you can bench 200 pounds twice, it might be your 2 rep max, but it is not your ultimate 1 rep max. Now the caveat on that, outside of a professional strongman contest or a powerlifting contest, I would cap people's 1 rep max at either the most amount of weight they can handle or the most amount of weight they can handle without their form breaking down. So if you start bench pressing and your form is getting kind of messed up, your shoulders are coming forward, like you're barely squeezing it out and you're like, I think I could do 5 more pounds. As a coach, I would not be permitting that. So whatever you can hit for a single rep with good form, because it's never going to be picture perfect at a 1 rep max. That would be what that is. Now, in terms of the importance of it, as with everything, the importance of something is going to be relative to what the goal is or what the driving purpose is. But for everyone, having an understanding of, am I getting stronger or not, matters. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a grandma or grandpa who's thinking like, man, 5 years from now, am I going to be able to stand up off the couch? Getting stronger will help ensure that happens. It doesn't matter if you're looking for performance. It doesn't matter if you're a competitive athlete. If you just like being strong. Having a metric to, am I moving in the right direction? Am I getting stronger? Your 1 rep max is the ultimate measure of that. That's what it's telling you.
So how do we go about testing it? And does it differ by the type of lift that we're testing?
So it doesn't differ based on the lift. But in terms of testing it, essentially what you're going to do is whatever you would do to warm up generally. So you're going to get yourself to the point that you feel good, whether you do a hip warm up for squats or you're warming up your shoulders and elbows for bench press, whatever it happens to be. From there, my advice always is to conserve the number of reps you do. So let's say I'm going to work up to a 1 rep max on squat. I could squat 135, 100 times. I'm going to squat it for 5 reps, maybe. And then maybe I go to 185 and I squat that for 3. And then I'm probably doing doubles or singles, so sets of 2 or sets of 1 all the way up. I'm trying to conserve as much energy as possible while acclimatizing myself to more and more weight. Because you won't be neurologically or physically ready for a 1 rep max when you're cold. Or let's say I've warmed up and I've squatted 225 and I think I'm going to squat 500. Jumping straight to 500, I will not physically be ready for. Physically, neurologically, mentally, emotionally, like I won't be there. So very progressive weight jumps that get smaller as you get closer to where you're going. And maximizing how much energy you keep in the tank is key to building up and actually testing it.
You mentioned conserving energy. I think this is a huge one. This is a mistake that I often see. Sometimes it's at the end of their day. Sometimes they do a very, very elaborate workout. Sometimes they do some cardio just to get a sweat in, and now they're doing that progression that you just mentioned, working up to it. By then, they're shot. You're done, right? So, what should even, let's take it as far out as the couple of days leading up to this, right? So say you're really dialed in, you're dedicated to finding this 1 rep max. You've been working hard, let's say over the last 8 weeks, and it's time to retest again, whether you're doing it on your own or with your coach. What do the days leading up to a 1 rep max or a testing day look like? And what should that day, leading up to the time of the test even look like?
So leading up to it, 4 to 7 days out, I would not be training that lift hard at all. And if it was a deadlift, I'd keep it at least a week out. A squat, maybe about a week. A bench press, you could probably get away with a moderate amount of benching 4 or 5 days out. And then you're just going to let yourself recover. So there's this idea in training that you stress your body, your capacity diminishes as you stress your body. So the weakest you should be on a bench press is at the very end of your bench press workout. From there, your body starts to recover. And essentially, if you picture like a dip and a raise, it'll come back up beyond where you started at before the stress. And that's called super compensation. So you don't just recover, you recover plus a little bit. So in the time before, you're trying to give yourself that downtime to make sure that you get to the height of the peak of recovery you can get to. And ideally, that's where you're testing. In terms of the day of, my advice, if you're at the point where you're seriously testing a 1 rep max and planning it into your program, you should be self-aware of what makes you feel good. So if I was going to test my 1 rep max squat, I wouldn't do a 3-hour hike with my wife and the dog that morning. When I'm trying to lift heavy, like to feel a little bloated with food when I go do that. So if I was going to do a max out squat, I'd probably get all you can eat sushi like 2 hours before and come in like feeling like a big balloon, because that is something I like. Some people, when they're lifting heavy, prefer to be a little bit hungry or just like evenly satiated. But you're going to do the thing that would make you feel good. And for a lot of people, I love gun to the head analogies for almost everything. If there was a gun to your head, somebody said, right now, based on everything you know about yourself, what gets you as prepared as possible to lift? If you get the answer wrong, I'm going to blow your brains out. Whatever pops into your head, do that. Like whatever you'd say right there, test that. And then as you continue moving forward with a coach, with mentors, with questions you get answered in something like the Bodybuilding.com app, or even, I don't know, watching a YouTube video with one of your favorite experts. They might say things you're like, that sounds neat, maybe I'll try that. And you could try it before a regular workout and be like, oh, that wasn't it. That was, like Craig said, he likes being really bloated. I just threw up in my squat workout. That sucked. Test those things in regular workouts, but the things that you've noticed made you feel the best, bring those to that day.
Let's set some realistic expectations in terms of progressively improving your PRs. Now, I think people severely underestimate what a 10-pound jump or a 15-pound jump or a 20-pound jump. I think there are a lot of people out there who think, well, I just did this program for 8 weeks consistently. I'm going to add 30 pounds to my squat, right? So what, as a coach, Craig, what type of expectations do you set, with your clients? And of course that can differ, but, what kind of mindset do you get them in terms of, how big those jumps are in between programs?
So there are two things I do with that. One is I like to talk in terms of percentages. If you bench, actually no, we'll do this backwards. If I bench 100 pounds, but you bench 400 pounds, a 10-pound jump for me is 10%. And for you, it's what, 2.5? Somebody check that math. You can let me know in the comments. But it's a significantly higher percentage for me. That's why at gyms, you'll get dumbbells that go 5 pounds, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15, 17.5, 20. But you won't see a dumbbell that goes 80 pounds, 82.5 pounds, 85 pounds, because the percentage jump is so much smaller. So looking at your strength relative to that improvement with a percentage will give you a gauge on it. You're like, oh man, that was only 10 pounds. Well, 10 pounds is a lot. If you woke up 10% taller, or you woke up with 10% more net worth, or you drove 10% faster everywhere.
You weighed 10% lighter.
Yeah, it's a massive change. Like that's really big. 10 pounds doesn't sound like a lot, but 10% of your bench press or your squat or your dead, that sounds like a ton. The other thing I do when it comes to setting expectations is I like to start, and it took me a long time to learn this. I've done a lot of things wrong, like as a person and as a coach. So I've learned this.
That leads to growth in any realm.
Thankfully. I'll typically go, hey, what do you want? 3 months from now, what would make you happy? And sometimes they'll say things that are completely insane, but they'll say it. And I will always sit there stone-faced. Oh, cool. To do that, we're going to have to do this and this and this and this and this, and we can't do this and this and this and this and this. Can you do that every day for 3 months and not miss? And if the answer is yes, we give it a go. Usually they're like, whoa, that's a lot. I'm like, yes, but you want world-class results that you've seen on the internet with people who are either enhanced or people who do this full time. Like this is all they do. Like you're a dad with 3 kids and a job and you play pickleball with your wife every Saturday. I understand you want to add 20 pounds of lean mass to your frame in the next 3 months. But let's say it's possible. This would be our best chance to get there. Do you want to do all of this? And the negotiation then comes down to not what the goal is, because it's very hard to get people to change that. You go, are you willing to do all of this and not miss for that length of time? And if they're not, it's like, cool. Then let's readjust our expectations based on what we're willing to pay. If I walk into, is there a Louis Vuitton store here? There must be near here, right?
Of course.
I walk into Louis Vuitton. Like, I go, I want a Louis Vuitton bag. They go, cool, here's the price. I go, oh, I don't know if I want a Louis Vuitton bag anymore. Like, I don't know if this is a good idea. That I find much better than, I want a Louis Vuitton bag. No, you don't. You go, no, I do. You go, no, you don't. Way better. And you can do this with yourself. Anybody watching this can do this with themselves. Go, cool, what would it take to get the thing I want? Can I do that, and am I willing to do that? And you don't have to be. But then scale down the expectation to the effort you're willing to pay.
Love it. Craig, before we move on to the last and final topic, I just want the record to show that we have it documented that Daniel Bitts bench presses 400 pounds. So before we move on, rounding out our conversation on finding the 1 rep max, let's condense everything that we just spoke about into 3 tips, for somebody who's maybe going for their first 1 rep max. What are your 3 tips for them?
Monitor your form as you go. Take your phone. If you don't have somebody you trust who can watch you, set your phone up, watch each set back. And you're going to do that, 1, to make sure your form's not breaking down, and 2, sometimes you'll be like, man, that was really hard, and you'll see the video and the bar moves way faster than you think. You're like, okay, if I was watching somebody do that, I'd probably tell them they could make a 20-pound jump. So film every set and watch it back, especially for form. Number 2, small numbers of reps. You can do as many weight jumps as you want, but take it slow that way. Number 3.
Eat lots of sushi.
Yeah, all you can eat sushi is that's a pretty good one. I've never gone wrong with that. I've gotten right to the border of regretting it, but I've never regretted it. All you can eat sushi is tip number 3. That's the bonus tip.
I love it. Rounding out today, Craig, we're going to move into the topic of training for mass versus training for power. So there's a difference in training styles when we're training to put on muscle versus training for power or, say, performance. So I want to break open a couple of things: rep schemes, programming styles, splits, all of the fun stuff. So first of all, break down what is the biggest difference between training for muscle versus training for power or performance.
So when we're talking about power and performance, there's a pretty broad spectrum, even within power and how people use it, or performance. So the biggest difference, training to build muscle, training to grow muscle, to bodybuild.
Yeah, aesthetics. We're focusing on aesthetics. We want to get big. We want to get,
jacked.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Like, if you're not jacked, if you haven't been jacked, you should try it. It's great. But the biggest difference between training for aesthetics and training for a power or performance model, regardless of the specifics within it, training for aesthetics is about workload. And there's a million different ways to skin that cat, but it's about workload. Training for power and performance is about velocity. It's about the speed the bar or the thing you're lifting is moving. And the velocity you train in is how you zero in on the particular outcome you want. But it becomes, one is about total work, one is about speed of the movements.
So let's get into the granular details of the difference between those two as well. Give me the examples of the rep schemes in terms of how we're training for hypertrophy, right, versus power.
So if we're talking power and we're talking like explosive power output, let's say for an athlete, if I was looking at aesthetics, I'd probably give people 2 options. The first being more suited to a beginner and the second being a little more advanced, but I'll give you both and then compare to power. For a beginner, you could do the standard, I'm doing 5 sets of 10 on my leg press, or 5 sets of 10 on squat. I'm looking for a large amount of total work. With somebody more advanced, it might be I'm doing 2 heavy sets of squats, and then I'm doing a back off set of squats where I cut the weight 25, 30%, and I go to failure. So you're, again, looking for total work and stress on the particular muscles. If we were to contrast that to something for power, if we were to take, so Westside Barbell has something called the dynamic method, which is about building explosive power. And if you were to squat with the dynamic method, you'd be doing 10 to 12 sets of squat with 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max, but you'd be doing sets of 2 with very low rest, and the focus would be on how fast you're moving the bar on that movement. So one is about practicing a physical quality. That's power. I'm practicing being explosive. I'm practicing being powerful. The other is about total work and steadily increasing that over time. To increase my performance, I don't necessarily have to increase my total work over time if I'm talking explosive output, but I need to increase the quality of that work. I need to get better at being explosive. So I practice being explosive. To build muscle, I need to slowly increase my amount of work over time so that continued stress helps me add the muscle I'm looking for.
And I'm assuming you mentioned rest time in here as well, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but when we're looking at more performance or power athletes, I'm thinking let's put into athlete terms, like a baseball player, a soccer player. These are people who need to have one-step explosiveness, right? So the work that they're doing in a weight room, even things like, basketball and some of these things where it's very quick burst of energies that is spent, right? So I would assume you mentioned it's a lower rest. So we're doing the 2 reps at a lower rest. How much rest? Like
probably 30 to 40
seconds.
Yeah.
Sure. Because we want to train our energy system to be able to handle that load with minimal rest versus if we're training for aesthetics, one could argue, you have more time. We're almost getting to full recovery.
I would absolutely argue that. I would directly argue that, actually. I think that's 100% right.
Where does a cardiovascular role come into play when we're training these 2 different goals? More the hypertrophy. It can be argued that it is a less of a heart strain for that type of training versus your power and performance.
Completely. So if I was training strictly for aesthetics and I was also concerned about general heart health, I'd be doing really low intensity cardio for anywhere between 3 and 5 days a week. And let's say it was 20 or 30 minutes. I'd be doing that for heart health. I'd be doing it for recovery. Depending on when you're eating and what you're eating, it can aid in digestion. But there are a huge amount of benefits to just regular cardio, even for aesthetic goals. Even if you're like, I don't care if I die in 10 years, I just want to be jacked. Low intensity, steady state cardio will help you get more jacked too, and maybe prevent you from dying in 10 years. When it comes to athletic goals, it needs to be much more specific. What is expected of this athlete? A baseball player and a boxer both need explosiveness. They both need to be able to turn that on when they want it, but one of them needs a much bigger gas tank for that. Like a baseball player, what if they hit a home run or think they hit a really good ball and have to run the bases? They're only doing that. Like, they get a lot of rest afterwards.
For the most part, it's swing the bat, hit the ball, sprint to first, or
Right.
sprint from first to second, or push off, your leg to get to backhand that grounder.
Yeah. Do you know about baseball?
I was a D1 softball player.
Whoa. Hey, I don't know anything about baseball. I went to coach my daughter's team when they needed a parent volunteer. I bought 2 baseball books on Amazon. I'd never hit a baseball. I don't know if I'd ever thrown one. Like, I had no idea what was going on.
We'll chat offline, Craig.
Yeah, I picked a dicey example. So baseball players need that same explosiveness, but then get a lot of downtime. A boxer needs almost this continual flow of explosiveness with a ton of work over time. Like, they're constantly working or they're going to get knocked unconscious. So looking at those helps you manipulate a performance program specifically to the goal. So performance programs need to be much more particular as you get to higher and higher levels. Like when my daughter was playing baseball versus you playing D1, the level of specificity required is much more significant for you, obviously. But as you move forward in performance, that specificity needs to be there. And everything in your program should be justified by that.
Yeah. Now, I think we'd be remiss, if we didn't really clarify, majority of the people who are listening to this probably just want to gain a couple pounds of muscle, lose a couple pounds of fat, live a little bit longer, and just be all around healthier, right? I think the ratio split between folks like that and folks who are truly dedicated to a sports-specific program at this time is rather small. But I will also make the argument that there are a lot of folks out there, a lot of adults out there who maybe have hobbies that they're very passionate about, and they do want to excel at those, whether that's the baseball or softball league down in Central Park or some rec basketball leagues, right? And they want to increase that performance. I think there's a lot of misinformation and just a lack of education out there in terms of training for those sport-specific movements in the gym. I think what you often see, I'm going to throw out a completely random example. Let's say it's a 45-year-old guy here in New York City and he plays in a rec basketball league, but he's training for hypertrophy in the gym, where what his main goal is he wants to feel a little more, explosive, a little more able, to play in that league. So I think there's a time and a place for everything. You just have to be really clear in terms of what your goal is and be intentional when you're going about your programming. And that goes back to working with a coach.
Completely agree. For those people, if I may,
yeah,
I'm going to make a general suggestion. I'm going to make a couple general suggestions. There'll be 2 or 3. One is, like you said, figure out what the thing is that you actually want, or what all the things are. Because there's a variety of areas in training where you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So let's say you're saying, hey, I want to be fairly jacked, but I want to be able to play in my rec basketball league. I want to be healthy and functional over the long term. Like, cool. So we've got some ideas here. You could do a heavy upper and lower day per week and a lighter upper and lower day per week, where in one you focus on getting strong, which will serve everything, and the other one you focus on getting more fast, more explosive, more powerful, which will serve your sport goals. And then with all the movements you're doing under those. So your main movements can be heavy or light, or heavy or fast, let's say. And your movements after that, a broad variance in movement will help keep you injury-free. Because when you play D1 softball versus, let's say, I go play softball in Central Park, the variance in your movements versus mine, when I catch and throw a ball, mine are going to be all over the map. I'm not precise with baseball the way a D1 player would be. So the broader variance in my program I have, the more robust I'll be, or the more resistant to injury I'll be, because I put myself in a variety of situations. But then we take all that extra work and we go, okay, we're going to build muscle because we want to look jacked, but we also want to be fit to do all this stuff. Cool. Take your get jacked training and make it take less time. Do more work in less time. You'll get the cardiovascular benefits. You'll get the aesthetic benefits. It'll help you in your sport. Like, you can combine these instead of going, do I want to be jacked or do I want to do a sport-specific program? You can mix those into a really unique blend just by having a couple essential movements in your program and then really pushing the pace on the others.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to certainly be learned from training like an athlete. I think oftentimes a lot of us, we're high school players or college players, maybe we find some sort of passion in the years after, and then, we know what the steady decline looks like there. But there's something to be said about continuing to train explosive movements, to continuing to train speed. It really does equip you in a lot of different ways. When you're stepping off that curb quickly on a rainy day and you can catch yourself, well, guess what? That probably just came from some of the cleans or some of the box jumps or some of the things that you're doing inside of the gym. I think too often we get really stuck into a box of linear movement. We're not doing rotational work. We're not doing agility work and athleticism work. And, I know Coach Ken has a lot of this upcoming in some of the workouts that he'll be doing in the app, right? Just really staying fit for life is so underrated. And I think, we shouldn't box ourselves, to your point, Craig, we shouldn't box ourselves into, well, I'm only training for hypertrophy and I'm only training for performance or whatever the goal may be.
Yeah, and on a personal level, though, I feel a lot of people will resonate with this. It's cool to be jacked, but if I'm jacked, it's like, hey, can you throw that to me? And I toss it and pop my pec. That's not cool. That's not cool at all. Like, you don't want to look like you can do stuff and actually be like, listen, there's a Lambo, like I painted a Lamborghini out of cardboard and I just put it on top of my 1993 Civic. You're like, wait, what? Like, nobody wants to be that guy or girl. So having a mix of those things in your program, unless you're like, hey, my performance in bodybuilding or sports or whatever is my career. In which case, do what it takes to make the most money you can and be successful in your career. If it's not that, hypertrophy training has permeated almost all aspects of gym life to the point that we don't even realize it's our fundamental first language in the gym. And it doesn't need to be, nor should it be if you want a broad spectrum of results. And being jacked is awesome, but being jacked at the expense of everything else is the Lambo cardboard on top of the old Civic. Like, it's not cool when you actually have to take it out for a spin.
Very well put. I love the analogy, Craig. Rounding out here with the next couple, I want to be clear. Training for muscle gains and hypertrophy training is not a male-focused goal, right? So oftentimes we think men and women should have totally different plans for the same goals. Can you debunk this a bit for us?
Yes. Yes, I can. There are a variety of people who have talked about the pink tax, which is like, hey, you take a razor, but you put it in a pink package, you say it's for women, you charge 50% more. I think, broadly speaking, people have done that with fitness. They're like, hey, this is training science. This is how you get more muscular. This is how you get leaner, stronger, faster. And they're like, but here's our pink version where, like, women have to come over here and do this special thing, and it probably costs more as the way they're getting people to follow them or whatever. Men and women inside, I can tell you, having daughters, we are fundamentally so different. It's like insane. But physically, we're not that different. The things that are going to make you jump higher are going to make me jump higher, and vice versa. The things that are going to help you build muscle are going to help me build muscle, provided we're both at the same level of training. But it's nonsense that women need some hyper-specific program that defies all of the laws of exercise science that men are using. If you'd like your biceps to be more jacked, or you want more shoulders so you have more of a V-tape or an hourglass, we can do the same things to get those. Like the fundamental differences in terms of the programming are massively overplayed to the point that it's exhausting.
And that goes for all goals. It goes for hypertrophy. It goes for performance. It goes for endurance. I mean, now we know that the studies behind the female athletes is not nearly at the height of where men is, and that goes across the board for a lot of the medical journals that we look at today. Just women were really not the focus groups that were included in a lot of stuff. Thankfully, we're seeing that start to shift now over the last decade or so. But there is no reason to say that women shouldn't be doing the same exact program that a man is doing to train for a specific goal in mind.
Completely. And anybody pushing that as an idea either has a fundamental misunderstanding of how things work, or they're lying to you because they'd like some of your money. Like, those are the two options. They either don't understand or they do understand, and they're doing something as a sales pitch. And I would argue it's not any different than, hey, what am I going to do? My son wants to be a lawyer, but so does my daughter. I've got a plan for my son. What should I tell my daughter to do? Like, probably the same thing. It's probably about the same thing. Like, and women, I'm sorry for all the men listening. Women, on average, work way harder than men in the gym. Way harder. Like, I don't know if it's a lack of ego. I don't know if I've never been able to figure out what it is. The average woman in the gym, like, who cares about it, is a killer. Like, the average woman is probably in the top 15% of men for work ethic, in my experience. And the ones who really embrace that and follow a serious program, similar to what a male counterpart with the same goals might be following, they crush it.
Do you see that in some of the past and current clients that you train with today?
That women work harder?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, yes. By miles.
Goes and tells his male clients not to watch this episode.
Now, any of my male clients watching this, like, feel free to ask me. Ask me what category you're in. Be like, hey, do most of your female clients work harder than me? And I will tell you honestly, And for some of them, yes, it's going to be yes.
It's time for a New Year wake up call for Craig's male clients here.
Yeah, but truly, I think women in, it's going to get like slightly political or philosophical. Women who dedicate themselves or have a goal in something that is traditionally male dominated always seem, I think they feel like they have something to prove to a degree. And I think that feeling is reasonable. Not that I'm saying they have to prove themselves, but I can see where that would come from. And it works really well. Like they really have to push and try and fight for their spot, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain degree, there's a percentage of women who do walk around with a chip on their shoulder, but they put that to work once they step into a gym. We see this a lot, right? It goes back to the old, I don't even know what brand it was, but it was anything you can do, I can do better, right? In the 90s,
yeah.
Right? So it's very much so that mindset. And I think the leaps and bounds that we've seen occur in women's sports specifically, just in the last decade alone, has been a monumental shift. And the data and science that is coming out now, because I talked to the head strength and conditioning coach over at UT for the women's basketball team, and to hear some of the stuff that they're doing with their women's basketball team, the technology that they're wearing on a daily basis in their practices, and the data that's coming out of that, and then that's being shared in the general strength and conditioning world. It's having a moment. It's really exciting to see. And what's most exciting is the point that both you and I have made so far in the last couple of minutes. We have officially, I think, as an industry, debunked the idea that women can not train as intense, as hard, and at the same level as their male counterparts.
Completely, and for women who are working hard, especially, and I would put men who are working really hard in this category as well. Get a chip and put it on your shoulder, and then every day prove why it should be there. And that doesn't mean I think you should go be a jerk at the gym and, I don't know, push somebody off the bench you want. But get an internal chip. As a personal example, my youngest daughter, 3 or 4 months ago, started going wanted to go to the gym with my wife. They started going. She started eating healthier, with intent to I'm going to be as healthy and energetic as I can be.
How old is she?
14 right now. Has completely transformed her body. Way stronger. She looks amazing. She looks healthy. She looks happy. It's been amazing to see. And if I could give her something, it'd be a little chip on her shoulder where internally she's going, hey, I've done something that most people can't do or won't do. And I'd like for you to have that. I'd like to have that. I'd like every single person watching this to get a chip and put it on their shoulder and just keep it inside, so that when you have that voice inside, that is your lazy voice that wants you to get a donut or skip that workout or do something because you don't think anyone's going to know or anyone's going to see. And that little chip is nah, I'm better than that. I'm better than that. I love that. I'd like everybody to get one of those.
I love it. We're going to round out this episode within the same topic of training mass versus training for power. So I want you to give us your biggest piece of advice for being successful in terms of training for mass. And I want you to give us your biggest piece of advice for being successful in training for power performance-based goals.
My biggest piece of advice training for mass is a lot of what's going to matter is outside the gym. Recovering like crazy and eating probably more than you think you need if you're trying to put on a significant amount of mass, and all the right foods. But a lot of it's going to be outside the gym. You can't will yourself to grow muscle by training more or training more often or training longer or training harder. Once you're doing a good job in the gym, the rest of your job is to recover and let that work take effect. When it comes to performance or power training, imitate someone who is powerful and explosive when you're in the gym. If you imagine, I don't know, I'm not good with any sports, not just baseball. Take the most explosive guy you recognize in the NFL. How would this guy squat? What would it look like when he was doing bench press? Imitate him. That is the best thing you could possibly do. Doing that is at least as valuable as a better program. You could have a mediocre program, But if you go in there and you execute it like you're a genetic freak from the NFL or wherever, you'll get results. It will switch things on and it will have you perform in a way that actually moves you towards that. So explosive and power, fake it till you make it. Everything else, rest and recover till you make it.
It flows. It works.
I'm going to trademark that.
We'll get the bumper sticker made.
That's what we need.
Craig, thanks so much for stopping by. It was great to have you on the pod again.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode here at Bodybuilding.com.
Yeah.